So I thought I'd address some of the criticisms toward Jordan Peterson, particularly his religious views, because I noticed a trend here, and that is to try and nitpick any little thing that could be wrong with somebody's opinion or position, and then try to use that against them, particularly in the certain clusterfuck group that likes to frequent in their own hangouts and find any reason whatsoever to call somebody a racist, a fascist, and so on and so forth. But with particular to Jordan Peterson, he is a theist, I think, or probably a deist, although he's never actually clarified. But the way he speaks reminds me of deism and not theism. I don't think that he takes the Bible literally. I do believe that he probably thinks there is a God of some sort. He often talks about the metaphysical and how he can't get past the idea that such thing exists. So that's what I thought I'd address. So first, as I always do, let's go down and actually define the metaphysical according to Merriam-Webster. Sounds like a good idea. Probably not, but we'll try. He's probably referring to what would be called the supernatural, or the realm of transcendency that exists past our perception of the senses. So there's two ways you could go about doing this. If you wanted to go about the realm of beyond the realm of perception, well, that's quantum physics for you right there. You cannot see the composition of a molecule. You cannot feel the collision of atoms. I mean, you can in some sort of sense with feeling your fingers collapse and touch each other, but the actual impact of the atoms itself is beyond us. You cannot see dark matter, to give you another example. But all these are testable in scientific methods throughout essentially the STEM fields, particularly physics, for example. Particle physics, theoretical physics, chemistry even, can all test and attest to the existence of this micro world, if you will, the unimaginable worlds of the atoms, essentially. If you go on CuriosityStream, you'll find something on quantum physics. I suggest you watch it because it kind of messes with your head a little bit, especially if you have a limited understanding of physics. But it's all the fun nonetheless. But I digress. So I think he's referring to the supernatural when he's talking about this, the realm of what things can be perceived, and things that people think exists that are beyond the realm of the real. So he often rails against materialists such as Sam Harris, saying that this is all that there is. Sam Harris, being a neurologist, understands that all this stuff is chemicals in the brain. Well, I'm going to link in the description a neurologist that had a stroke. And in this stroke, she experienced the realm of the metaphysical, if you will, where she connected to everything. She was a part of everything. And it was her mind having a stroke. Quite literally. She'll show you the picture of after they took the golf ball out of her head, essentially, or softball. It was a large mass, essentially. What's really cool as well about her in particular is before the stroke, she used to study, or does study, neurological behaviors and neurological impulses, if you will, because her brother, I believe, was schizophrenic or something like that. It's a TED Talk. So I'm not going to put footage in here because TED Talks tend to get you flagged, and fuck them for all that there is. They really like to keep ownership of it, but since I'm not criticizing their point, I'm going to leave it as a reference in the description. Anyways, she would describe what she felt was a connection to everything, that she was transcendent in a manner of speaking, all the while having a stroke. Now, for the rational brain, the metaphysical type people, or excuse me, the materialist type people would realize that, well, that was all in her head because she was having a stroke, because she described she'd feel everything and then be zapped right back into her body, as it were, and go, oh my God, I'm having a stroke. I need to call somebody. And then the letters and words would blend together and she couldn't call anybody, and then it snapped back to reality and she'd be trying to dial but the numbers were upside down or some shit. Essentially exactly what happens in a stroke. Your cognitive abilities go straight out the window because your brain is basically having a conniption fit, a seizure. And this kind of metaphysical premise where the supernatural exists is the other thing that he might be talking about. Well, the metaphysical I'm going to throw out as if it were something I can throw out, because if we're talking about the experience beyond the physical realm, then we're talking about the existence of things outside of nature, in my opinion. If we were going to go that way. If we were going to go with the experience of things that you cannot perceive, I invite you to see the stroke victim who did just that, but it was all in her head, obviously, because she was literally having a stroke. The same goes for psychedelic drugs. They alter your perceptions to the point where you think you're experiencing things that are beyond the realm of the universe or the realm of the natural world, and thus your mind decides to develop things that are straight out of your imagination. Not that I should broadcast this, but I know of a person that had this experience and would see things melt into the walls, or his face would twist upside down in the mirror. Or, what was it? Posters started talking to them. Yeah. I can't speak on who it was or where or when. Not that I would. But let's just say it was an interesting situation with these people that supposedly experienced a metaphysical moment. Suffice to say, if we are going to go to the second premise, where it is the supernatural, which is things that exist outside the natural, the way I can understand the supernatural as in a definition is that what is not explainable by nature. So things that happen that we currently don't have an explanation for. This is a classic fallacy of the argument from ignorance, in my opinion. You're talking about things that we currently don't understand. We don't have the mathematics, we don't have the physics, we just don't know what the hell's going on. Dark matter being the easiest and obvious example of this. We just don't understand dark matter. A recent discovery in the Hadron Collider is that we found particles that go faster than light. What that means? No idea. How is that even possible? Equally, no idea. Nothing's supposed to be able to go faster than light, but here's these particles that literally are going faster than light. Thank you, Outlook, for that bling, and go straight to hell. Anyways, the supernatural are things, essentially, that we don't understand. Being an argument for ignorance, I begin to question, why would someone think the supernatural exists in the first place? Let's take something that we believed once upon a time and we now know is not true. The stars, for example, are just big lights in the sky, pinholes of the angels or some shit like that. We know those to be either stars, other stars like our sun, or galaxies, entire galaxies out there. We've been able to photograph them. Recently, within the last few hundred years, those were supernatural. The order of the stars would guide our ships. They would, we would be able to draw images out of them. Cassiopeia, Orion and his belt, Big Dipper, the Little Dipper, Leo, you name it. You know, these are all constellations that we basically connected the dots, quite literally, and said that these were the gods. The supernatural, as it were. We now know that's not true. We know that these are stars and whatnot. And this supernatural claim is actually now understood and quite natural. My argument for the supernatural not existing at all is because if you go and say that something is supernatural, The moment you can act upon nature means that we could potentially understand it. So everything in the universe, everything that affects or leaves an effect, or is a cause of something else, is in fact natural, but not supernatural. Because just because we do not yet understand it does not necessarily mean that it is supernatural in nature, but more to the point, natural in nature. Things happen in nature we might not be able to understand just yet, but that does not necessarily negate the possibility or the premise that it is a natural occurrence. It might be a rare fluke, it might be something bizarre that happens and we just don't know what the hell it is. But that does not mean that it is supernatural, more so that it is natural. And we just lack comprehension. This would be a negation of the argument of ignorance when it comes to supernatural claims and the metaphysical truth, or metaphysics as it's called, where things are transcendent beyond our perceptual senses, which is garbled junk to mean that the supernatural may exist, and just because we can't describe it or explain it means wow, therefore God. I've often seen this argument, and I'm surprised actually that Dr. Peterson actually puts this forth, that the metaphysical and the supernatural could potentially exist, because he doesn't like the materialist claim that all there is what we are. Too bad for you, because the only evidence for anything in this world is natural. There is no evidence for supernatural. In fact, as a second point, as I was saying earlier, the moment that the supernatural would act in nature, it then becomes natural. So therefore, the supernatural could never exist in the first place. Unless you can find something which has no pre-cause, I guess you could say. First it didn't exist, and now it does. Quantas are probably close to that, where electrons kind of bleep in and out of existence. Some might point to the beginning of the universe and say, oh, look, there's the start of your supernatural. Clearly, from nothing came something. But the unfortunate thing about that is we don't know what the beginning of the universe was, what it looked like, or even if it happened. Right now, the math says yes, everything started from a 0 in time, literally. But I'm not one to actually buy that, to be honest. I'm still on the fence with time being infinite and not necessarily a part of the universe, but something that exists beyond the universe. But then again, it's because the only time that we can perceive time is because we're in time. And to try and perceive time outside of time is to try to say that time doesn't exist. And no one can perceive that, which could be metaphysical. But I think that's the only thing that possibly could, because it's not something that we could perceive. Just like we can't perceive death, literally. The best that we can perceive death is go to sleep and not dream. You cease to exist when your brain shuts off. But I think the point I'm trying to make here is the supernatural negates itself. To have evidence of the supernatural would mean that it would have to do something that defies all the laws of nature, the very fabric of the universe. Something would have to happen that violates basically all of physics. And then at that point, if we were able to study it and examine it and find out the cause and the reason, or the mathematics behind it, the physics behind it, it wasn't supernatural to begin with. It was a natural thing, a natural occurrence to which we'd never seen before, but now we have experience of. The supernatural in itself seems to be an argument of, I don't know, therefore God. Or, I don't know, therefore supernatural, metaphysical, we have a soul in our beings and all that fun stuff. without any actual evidence. And maybe that's because I'm a materialist in pragmatic sense, that I demand evidence of your extraordinary claim where the supernatural exists or the metaphysical exists. But you can't provide evidence for either, because that would negate it being metaphysical or supernatural. So it's a leap of faith, essentially. One that no rational atheist that I can think of is willing to take. Because you're asking me to believe in something that we cannot prove exists. I can believe in atoms because we can prove they exist. We can measure them, we can weigh them. We can't experience them physically. We can't see them physically. I can believe in dark matter because we can weigh it, we can examine it, we know what's going on, to the most part. But the metaphysical and the supernatural, you're asking me to believe in something to which there is no evidence, and take it on faith that it exists, rather than trying to prove that it exists through some method that would be able to examine said thing or said cause. And bringing back to the beginning, if a stroke victim is experiencing one with the universe and finding nirvana while having a stroke, clearly the metaphysical and the supernatural have the same issue. They come from, they exist in the same part of the brain that she had her stroke in. I'm going to leave it at that. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know I haven't done anything in a while. I haven't even done my podcast because I've been having some health issues. So go figure. I should be able to get back on a regular schedule here shortly, though. So hopefully to see you all next time, and thank you.